ships until it crashed, and then they took all the iron out of it, you know, the structural steel, and used it in the war effort for World War I.
Wow.
So it's an incredible thing. It's too bad it's not still there.
But the building behind it is still there, is that correct?
The building that's there was a mess hall, is a mess hall, that was built by the veterans camp. Eventually in 1916, for $60,000, the island was sold, that portion of the island, the amusement park, was sold to 3 veterans organizations. And they built that mess hall there, and they ate there until early 1980s.
So what's going on with the Veterans Island now?
As far as I know, these 3 veterans organizations, the VFW, American Legion, and a Purple Heart organization, decided it wasn't being utilized enough and decided to sell it. Unfortunately, Orono, city of Orono, stepped forward and has purchased the island from the veterans. I don't know that it's closed yet, but it's their purpose, their idea is to have it as a park, available to all, as a hiking park, I think. I don't think there'll be, you know, major activities there. So Big Island really has an incredible history, I think, as it dates way back to early Indians. In early American Indians, it was a very favorite location. They came there for ceremonials, they came there to fish and hunt, and to pick berries and camp out there.
And what was the name of the island then?
Well, you know, Big Island's had a lot of names, and they originally, they called it Wet Tutonka. Wet Tutonka.
And what does Wet Tutonka mean?
It translates to springtime move to the sugar camp.
And why did they call it a sugar camp?
Well, there was these huge maple trees there, and it was the Indians' sole source of sugar. They would tap the trees in the spring of the year, boil down the sap, and make crystallized sugar of it. And it was their supply for the entire year.
Other names of this island were Cottage, Owens, Meeker, Morris, and finally Big Island, as it is known today. This 275-acre island was split in 2 when Olaf Swenson cleared the wetlands, creating the present-day channel.
Olaf Swenson was a banker and an entrepreneur in Minneapolis, and he acquired 125 acres on Big Island from William Morris, on which he built a magnificent estate, a 21-room house, which was just really unusual for the time. It had steam heat, and it had gas lights, which was really unusual. And it was a marvelous estate. And he also had the channel dug between the 2 bodies of land. There's really no differentiation, but it's all Big Island. But there's really 3 small islands. There's Mapiata, which is a small one in that channel. He had a lot to do with bringing in Norwegian immigrants, and then he sold them farmland. And he was a real source of goodwill for immigrants, helping them get here in the first place, and then selling them farmland to homestead. So he had an incredible house. The foundations are still there, and the boathouse is still there. It's overlooking the North Shore. And so it was a fantastic place. It eventually burned down, as did many things on Big Island.
Of course, Big Island is still a Minnetonka hotspot. The cove draws fun and sun seekers to the sandy north shore of Big Island on just about every hot summer day. And the City of Orono and Hennepin Parks are in the planning process for a new public park on the east side of the island. Today, Big Island is home to the Power Squadron Boating Club, the Veterans Camp, which is where we are now, and 49 homes and cabins, some of which are year-round dwellings. So if you've ever wanted to live on a beautiful island, just call one of your friendly local realtors, like me, to see if there are any properties that are for sale. I love coming out here. Now we're heading back to Excelsior on the Minnehaha, which has a very interesting story all its own.
Well, the streetcar line, or the boats, continued for 20 years. They operated from 1906 until 1926, at which time automobile transportation, automobiles and fuel was available, so that the ridership declined, and the boats were taken out of service. 3 of them were sunk in the deep water north of Big Island. One of them was sold to a private party and ran as a charter boat, and the rest were sold, were scrapped and sold. The Minnehaha sat at the bottom of the lake for 54 years until some salvage divers and a dredging company, local dredging company, recovered the boat, brought it to land. In 1990, clear title was obtained and money was raised and restoration efforts started. And by 1996, the Minnehaha was launched, and 90 years after it first took to the waters of the lake, it again started carrying passengers.
Just steps from where the Minnehaha is now docked is where we would find the area's next big attraction, the Excelsior Amusement Park.
The Excelsior Amusement Park that most of us have either know or heard of was established. It was built in 1925 by the F.W. Pierce Corporation out of Detroit. They owned a number of amusement parks around the country. In fact, they had another one over at White Bear Lake called Wildwood. But the Excelsior Amusement Park was a big amusement park in Minnesota. And in fact, during most of the amusement park's life, I think you could go anywhere in the state of Minnesota, and if they asked you where you were from, if you said Excelsior, they'd say, oh yes, the amusement park, we've been there. It was probably the best known attraction in the whole state at one time. And but it was built in 1925, and it ran until 1973 when it was finally dismantled. And but during the Depression, the amusement park had tough times. They were looking for people with money, and nobody had any money. And so they did a number of things. For instance, they would do Saturday afternoon promotions where if you came to the amusement park and brought some milk bottle caps with you, 1 milk bottle cap and 3 cents would put you on any ride in the amusement park. It sounds dumb now, but it was a big thing then. Then they decided that they would hire a series of circus acts during the 1930s and the 1940s, and to try to attract people in. They figured if they could attract people to come and see these circus acts, that if they had any money, they'd spend it. So they would do that. In one week, you would see Smith's diving ponies, with the ponies going up a ramp and diving into a tank of water. And the next week, it would be Oscar Babcock doing a loop-de-loop on a bicycle. And then the next week, it would be the Wilno the Great being shot out of a cannon. And the biggest attraction of all was Captain Jack Payne, who dove off of a 100-foot ladder into a 5-foot tank of water. And Captain Jack would come out in his white circus tights and climb up that ladder and put his back to the audience. And then what he did was he just kept his body rigid, and he just fell off that platform and made one complete somersault and landed feet first in the water. But before he did that, they poured gasoline or kerosene on the water and then lit it with a torch. So it was a flaming tank that he dove into. It was really spectacular. It'd be spectacular today if somebody would do it. And then, of course, across the street from the amusement park was the Excelsior Park Ballroom, which was probably the nicest dance ballroom in the state of Minnesota. Later on, it was called Big Reggie's Dance Land, and when he brought rock groups in and so forth. But originally, it was called the Excelsior Park Ballroom, and all the big bands came there, Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Gray and Ted Weems. Big Reggie's, that didn't happen until after World War II was over with. And actually, Big Reggie's real name was Ray Colahan, and his dad had been the manager of the amusement park for years and years, or co-manager of the amusement park. And Ray eventually managed the amusement park as well as the dance hall, which they turned into Big Reggie's Dance Land. And he brought in people like the Dave Clark Five and other groups like that back there in the 50s and the early 60s. In fact, he's the one that was responsible for bringing in the Beatles to Met Stadium in their only appearance in the Twin Cities. And he arranged all of that. He gave me 4 free tickets to it and gave it to my kids, and one of them still has the ticket stub. It cost $5 for the ticket to see the beetle.